Hi everybody, welcome to the PM Forum Exeter webinar. I hope everybody's well in these strange times we find ourselves in. I'm delighted to welcome Alistair Banks, who's our speaker for today. Alistair is the director and co-founder of Optic Solutions. They are a digital agency based in Exeter, and they work with a number of professional services firms, as well as a number of other leading brands. Alistair's going to talk us through the power of having a strong personal brand on LinkedIn. I'll now hand over to Alistair.
Firstly, Anna, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a slightly odd scenario, talking to so many people, but just talking to myself for a little while. But I'm looking forward to the prospect of doing that. So we're here today to talk about thought leadership, personal branding and LinkedIn, which is something that is very close to my heart, very passionate about. It's something that I've built my own business off, and hopefully I can use some of the stories around that to kind of articulate some of the points that I want to go through today. So just to give you a quick agenda, we're going to start off by speaking a little bit about personal brand. I'm then going to go into social selling and something called SSI, which some of you may or may not know about. We're going to talk a little bit about thought leadership, and then we're going to dive right into LinkedIn and kind of give you some tips of how to use it effectively. Now, obviously, we do only have a short period of time today, and normally a session like on this topic would probably take a couple of hours. But I've tried my best to kind of pull out the most salient points for you today, and as we said, we've hopefully got some time for questions at the end. So just before I start, just want to give you a quick backdrop of who I am, why I'm here, why do I have credibility to do this. This is an awful picture of me and my co-director James 20 years ago when we started our business back at Exeter University. We were computer science graduates back then. James has a lot less hair there now, and I'm starting to lose mine. We started the company, as we said, in 1999, and that's grown to just a team of just under 20 people. So as Anna said, we're a digital marketing agency that do web design and development as well. It's about half and half in terms of the business split. And over the last 20 years, we've been very lucky to work with lots of firms in the professional services industry, amongst lots of other sectors as well. So hopefully, if you've got any questions, then I can dive into examples and talk to you about those as we go through. One of the things that I was quite lucky to do back in 2017, because it was fascinating as an experiment really, was to launch a course on a site called Udemy, which is an online university. And that course was all about how to use LinkedIn. So I've been training LinkedIn for the last sort of probably 5 to 10 years offline. And I thought I'd package all of that up, put it into a load of videos. So it's about 30 or 40 videos and sell it online. And I really did that just to kind of learn about the world of e-learning so that I could use some of those experiences to teach my clients how to, how they could benefit from it as well. But what was fascinating about that journey is that since that course went live only 3 years ago, almost 21,000 people have taken it across 163 countries globally. And actually the UK is only my 5th biggest, I think. So I'm big in America, apparently, India and Egypt of all places. But it's been very, very interesting, and the course gets good results time and time again. So hopefully that kind of gives me some credibility. And some of what we're going to talk about today is taken directly out of that course itself. So I'm going to start by talking about what personal brand is first, before I go into LinkedIn specifically. What is personal brand? Now, Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, is probably a better person to explain this than I am. And he was quoted quite a few years ago as saying that personal brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. So think for a minute, what are people saying about you guys, when you leave the room, or the people in your firm that you're maybe dealing with and trying to infuse about doing this stuff? What are people saying about them when they're not there? That is their personal brand. I would also go on to add to that your personal brand is also what people find when they Google your name. And we live in an age now where it's so easy to find out about people. One of the things that if you come to sell to me in my firm, one of the first things I'm probably going to do is Google both your company name and the individual that comes to try and talk to me about why I should use them, because it's an easy way for me to find out a bit more about their credibility as well. So understanding how you come across on Google, and if we were doing this face to face, I'd actually ask you to whip your phones out now and Google your name and see how you perform. Or maybe you should be Googling, say, the partners' names in the company that you work for and see how they come across, because you can almost guarantee that people they are trying to do business with will be doing that about them. And so having an understanding of that is very important. Why do I talk about personal brands so much? Well, one of the key reasons is that there are examples of where personal brands attract more people than the company brands in almost every sector that I've ever seen. And I've picked out a couple of like really important or really big companies here to kind of show you this this example. So I'm using Twitter here, but I could have used LinkedIn, but it's just a bit harder to find it. But this is an example of where Tesla, so everyone will know Tesla, I'm sure, have 4.3 million followers on Twitter. SpaceX have 9.1 million followers on Twitter. So they're not doing badly, right? They're doing pretty well. But then when you look at Elon Musk, who's at the top of the tree, he has 28.5 million. So absolutely eclipsing the company brands with his own personal brand. Other examples that people will know, Virgin versus Richard Branson. Virgin's got 250,000 there. Richard Branson, 12.7 million. People want to follow people. Completely down the other end of the scale, but in a different market, Money Saving Expert. So Money Saving Expert attracts 306,000 followers on Twitter, but Martin Lewis, who runs it, who's the personal brand, the face of it, is double that. And I see this in my own company as well. So Optic Solutions, my company, has 3,000 followers, or at the time I took this screenshot, had 3,000 followers, and I have 6,000 followers on Twitter. So we found this through the years that people do want to follow individuals, sometimes more than they want to follow the company brand. So if we can get our people, if we can get ourselves out there with strong personal brands, what will happen is we will attract work naturally to both ourselves and to our companies. So the second bit that I want to go into now is social selling. A few years ago, a guy called Coca Sexton from LinkedIn explained the process of social selling as being using your professional brand or your personal brand to fill your pipeline with the right people, the right insights, and the right relationships. So an interesting kind of concept. And I put together this graphic, which I've used on a number of our training sessions, which helps me to explain the difference. So on the left-hand side there, traditional selling. This is the world that I grew up in. So it's a bit of a murky, dark world that I don't really like to remember very much, because, you know, back then to get to people that we wanted to do business with, we had to buy lists of people cold, we had to phone up, we had to get through gatekeepers, we had rebuttals to use that, you know, if they said no, you can't get to that decision maker, you had certain ways that you would try and get around them. It was horrible. It wasn't a very nice world at all. But it was the way that we had it. And then since the onset or the advent of social media and social selling has popped up, we now have this wonderful ability to find out so much more about decision makers and target them directly, understand a little bit more than you might just get from reading up about that person through a newspaper or an article or something. You can actually really get to know them. It wouldn't be hard for you guys to go away and find out that, you know, two of my greatest passions as an individual are skiing and the Exeter Chiefs down here, the rugby team. And that for salespeople or people trying to do business with me is gold dust, because they know instantly how to bond with me, right? And they know that if they're going to get a meeting with me or they've got a meeting with me, that they maybe drop these kind of things in, and it just makes that whole kind of bonding process so much easier. And hand in hand with that, you've got things like the ability to ask for introductions or warm introductions as well. So social selling that came about with the advent of social media has been an amazing onset to the kind of world of sales and business development. Now, I want to highlight something which some of you may know about, which is something called SSI. So if you have a LinkedIn profile, you have a score. Now, this might be worrying some people on the call now. Yes, you are being scored by LinkedIn, and you're getting a score out of 100. And this is your social selling index. And the URL at the top of that slide takes you, hopefully if you're logged in, takes you directly to that score. So understanding this score is quite important, I believe, anyway. And if you're working with people in your firm to help them improve their overall way that they use this platform, then maybe benchmarking this score and actually looking at it now, looking at it in 6 months, looking at it in a year, and seeing if they've improved is quite a good way of working with them. The score is broken down into 4 sections. So it's how good are you at establishing your professional brand, how good are you at finding the right people, how good are you at engaging with the insights, and how good are you at building relationships. Now, you might be asking what a good score is. Some of you might have gone away to the URL and got your own scores up now and either be worrying or maybe you'll be elated, I don't know. But I've done this an awful lot over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, and I can tell you that anywhere between 30 and 50 is not too bad. 50 to 60 is pretty good. 60 plus, very good. 70 plus, you know, you're probably doing this instead of me. So that'll give you a kind of quite a good idea of where you fit. So now we're going to talk about LinkedIn. Now for me, LinkedIn has been for many years since I started using it, probably around 2004-ish now, has been my very best corporate network. You know, in a continuum of kind of social media sites, you've got, you know, the TikToks and the Facebooks and things like that over this left-hand side, very personal, right through to kind of Twitter, and then beyond that, LinkedIn in terms of the kind of best corporate network. So by far and away, this is the one that I spend the time on to attract business to my firm. A couple of examples I thought might be useful just to give you. Hopefully they get the cogs whirring about how we use it, and that might get you thinking about it as well. So Goodridge here is a company which is a 250 million turnover business. Their offices are literally next to my house. I drive past them every single day. And one day I just thought, as I was driving past, I thought, look, I'm into cars. I like that kind of stuff. So I really, my antennas are always up when it comes to sales opportunities as well, but I'm always looking to try and open the door. So anyway, I thought that day I'd go back and find out who the CEO was using LinkedIn and ask for an introduction. I'm going to use that example later on. And anyway, they became a client of ours, and they've gone on to become a fairly significant client of ours over the years, tens of thousands of years, for tens of thousands of pounds every year for us, which is a reasonable size given the size of our agency, and a very big company as well to boot. A different example here is a company called Axions. These are a global infrastructure company. So Axions are the kind of people that would go into somewhere like a university and lay out all of the network infrastructure for that university. They actually work with Exeter University. And the reason that we won the work with Axions was that I was doing a career development program with Exeter University students, in fact, about using LinkedIn to enhance their career prospects. And in the session live, I did a little update just saying, doing this session at Exeter University, pressed send, and then the next thing I knew, I had a message or the next day from the sales director of Axions, who went to Exeter University and was connected to me, saying, Alistair, I had no idea you did this. I knew you as a web design company. I didn't realize you did LinkedIn training. I need you to come and train 30 of my LinkedIn sales staff on how to use it for business development up here in London. And away I went, did that, and actually that's led on to lots more work with Axions, and they've become a very big and significant client for us. So 2 examples there, very different examples of generated work through the use of LinkedIn directly from my company that I can kind of talk very passionately about. So for me, there are kind of 2 key ways to use LinkedIn. There's probably more than that, especially if you kind of take into account things like career development. But the 2 that we're focusing on really here are thought leadership and sales and marketing or business development, and how we can kind of use it for those purposes. So thought leadership is the process of, you know, if you are an expert in your space, so start to think not just about yourself, but maybe the people in your company as well, about where they have expertise and whether they can position themselves online as the expert in that space, in that niche, and use a tool like this to demonstrate that expertise. So they're not just going out to get leads or to use it as connections. They're using it to really demonstrate that they are a leader in their industry. LinkedIn itself came out with 3 examples of thought leadership. So first is industry thought leadership, where you might show or demonstrate your perspective on your industry, the news, the trends, the things that are going on in that. Organizational, so someone like a Branson might fall into this, where they might share more about the vision of or ethos of their business. And then product thought leadership or service thought leadership, where maybe you are very innovative or cutting edge when it comes to your own industry, and how you can start talking about how you're really pushing the boundaries of what you're doing, and again sharing that with the world to show that you are an expert in that industry. So those are the kind of 3 areas really of thought leadership. Now, I questioned whether to leave this in here, and I want to very quickly, because many of you, most of you I think, will be marketeers, and this is quite important, another area of marketing, but one that you'll be thinking about, I'm sure, SEO. So, and there's a segue here between these two. So a couple of years ago, Google announced something called Google Eats. It had been around in guises for a little while, but it became more prominent in an update about August 2018, I think it was. Google Eats stands for expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. And essentially what it is an update where Google are starting to understand the author of content or the authors of content on a website. So for many years before that, 20 years before that, since Google really began, they've only really been interested in the website, the content on it, the keywords, the backlinks. All of those kind of things have been the reasons that websites have ranked. And if you think about your own firm's websites, this is the way that you've probably focused on SEO over that time. However, in this update, now what they're starting to say is the person that authored this piece of content an expert in their own right? So can we, by following their name and going off and seeing if they've got a decent LinkedIn profile, if they've been cited in any kind of white papers or university sites or anything like that, then can we tell if that person is an expert? Because if they are, and they've authored content on this website, then this website should probably rank higher because this person's given their name to it. So there is this segue here between personal brand and making sure that we ourselves and the people that work in our firm have a strong personal brand, and SEO, where they can help us to get our company's websites ranked more highly. And yes, you'll probably have to do some technical stuff to make the most of that, but as I say, that's a different area, not one that we're necessarily talking about today. Okay, so I want to go into kind of some tips now, and I've broken this down into a number of different areas. So my tip 1 is all about connections, and just how important they are, and how I class these as the currency in terms of how successful your profile can be. So, and what I mean by that is that, if you have more connections, and I would caveat that by saying decent connections, then what that allows you to do is gain access, particularly from a biz dev perspective, to more connections, because the way that LinkedIn works with this kind of circles of influence or spheres of influence is really important here. So I want to try and demonstrate this with an example. So here you can see in front of you a screenshot of I'm going to take you back to the Goodridge example, right? So the guys with the sports cars and the 200 million pound company. At the time I was driving past that day, I had 4,892 connections on LinkedIn. And when I went back that night and I thought, I really want to do business with Goodridge and I'm going to find out who their CEO is, this is what came up. So the guy's name was John Hurahan, second line connection. So I'm not directly connected to him, but someone I know is connected to him. And in this instance, there were 17 shared connections. So what's interesting about this is that I then had to do the hard work in terms of getting that introduction to him. LinkedIn doesn't do that bit, right? It helps me to find the people, but it's not going to actually make the introduction for me. So I still got to do the hard work. So I had to go through those 17 connections and think about who I knew best, who might help me, who might know John, and let's try and play that out. So actually what I did was I chose the guy there in black and white next to where it says 17 connections, a guy called Andy, good friend of mine. I knew that he wouldn't mind me asking. I knew that if he didn't know John, he would just tell me. As it happened, he knew him very well, and he put us in touch with each other. he actually invited us to an event offline together, and he made sure that we shook hands and had a chat. And lo and behold, probably 6 months, maybe even a year later, Goodrich had become a client of my company's, because I obviously put the hard work in. So again, you know, LinkedIn hasn't done that bit for me. I've had to do that. But here's the thing. Let's go back to the numbers. So, and think about that. 4,900 connections only gave me 17 shared connections. So if you're sitting there, if I've been sitting there with 100 connections in the first place, or maybe even 500 connections, that number 17 would be so much smaller. It might have been 0, and I wouldn't have been able to use or leverage that introduction that I did to get into that company. So a key kind of takeaway here is to start building up those connections of those people in your company and yourself, because as you do that through life, and assuming LinkedIn continues to be, then all of those connections will be more and more important as you go through your careers. How do you connect with people? Well, obviously there's a number of different ways you can do this, and I can only really tell you about the ways that I like myself. So, you know, my personal preference is always to do a one-to-one introduction with someone. So to find their profile, to click on connect, and to always where I possibly can write a personal message. The chances of you being accepted by that person, particularly if it's very cold, is so much higher if you write a personal message. So please take the time to do that. There are also pages on, say, the networks tab where people will be recommended to you. And, you know, these will only be as good as if you filled out your profile well in the first place. There is a great little setting in the mobile app, which if you download the mobile app, you go to profile, you click on the top right hand button, there's a settings button, and you see this screen. And halfway down that screen, you'll see something that says sync calendar. Now, by doing that, I've synced mine up to my Outlook calendar through work. LinkedIn knows who I'm meeting and who I've met, and then it makes suggestions for people that I might want to connect with based on that. So in this screenshot here, you can see that I met this guy, Nick Benson, and in the notifications tab, it said, we see you've met Nick Benson, you might want to connect with him on LinkedIn, because I wasn't connected already. And actually it tells you when you've got meetings coming up as well. So it's a nice little tip. And my action here really is to ensure that you make connection building a habit. You know, for me, I go to a networking event or a meeting, I take down someone's details or their business card, and instinctively now I go back that day and I automatically ask to connect with them on LinkedIn. Sometimes I do it on my phone, it's a bit harder, and prefer to do it on my laptop and write a personal message, as I mentioned earlier on. So getting the people in your company to start making this a habit is a really important thing, or they just won't build their networks up. I'm now going to talk about the profile, and to be completely honest, you could probably talk about the profile for 40 or 50 minutes alone, so I'm not going to do that clearly, but I'm going to pick out a few things. It's key to me that you ensure that your profile is as fully filled out as possible, so things like education, experience, all of those areas that you need to make sure you've got filled out. But also look at things like any volunteering experience, any additional languages that you know or speak, any qualifications. There are areas where you can fill that out properly during this in the profile settings. I just want to pick out a couple of important things that I raised to people. Now, the way that I look at my profile, and I encourage you guys to think so this way too, is that if someone was coming to buy from me or my company and they put my profile up alongside my two biggest competitors, the CEOs of those digital marketing agencies, what would they think? Would they think Alistair is someone who knows what he's talking about and he's got the firm that I want to use, or would actually my competitors outdo me? So having that kind of view of how you come across versus your competitors or even your peers is quite important. So I did some training with the Met Office fairly recently, and we were training their scientists on how to use LinkedIn. And clearly it's not so much competition there, but they do have peers that they respect, is particularly in other countries. So we started to look at those profiles versus their own and start to kind of use those as benchmarks. A couple of things really just to point out. So the first thing I always say to people is this line that's directly under my name here that says Director of Digital Marketing Agency, passionate about everything digital. I do change this regularly, actually. It's different at the moment, but this is a line where probably 90% of people that I meet have their job title, right? That's pretty boring, having a job title. And it's a really key part of the page. It's kind of a key part of the real estate there, and your eye gets drawn to it the minute you look at someone's profile. So having a positioning statement there is a wise thing to do, something that just tells people a little bit more about you. The second thing to note is the photographs. You know, having a decent cover photo. A lot of people I come across put in fairly boring or bland marketing based brand pictures. I would say that that's a bit of a waste. I think that picture is a really good opportunity to kind of show some personality behind you, the company, what you do, maybe the niche that you work in, just to kind of, make the whole profile pop a little bit more. And having obviously a good proper photograph of yourself is clearly another really important area. The summary is something I want to touch on really importantly. So again, this is an area where I think probably 95% of people get it wrong, because most people put their boring CV in it. I'm sure that's not you. None of you have done this. But I do come across it a lot, right? They put their CV of it's me, I'm great. This is what I've done for the last 10 to 15 years. Okay, I want to flip that. I want you to think about the buyer. Think about the person that is actually looking at your profile with a view to using you or your firm, and start to think about what their needs are, and start to think about what value you can bring based on your expertise or maybe things that you've achieved or done for people, and start to craft the content in the summary based around that. It's a really important space. And as I say, so many people just misuse it by putting a CV in there. Now, there's a place for your CV. It's called experience in the profile. So use that bit for that section, and think about how you can be a bit more creative around your summary field. The next bit down used to be called rich media, and I think they've done a much better job of this now because they've called it featured. So featured allows you to upload slightly better, so rich media. So you can upload videos, you can upload slide decks, you can upload PDFs. So here, for example, on mine, you can link to the course that I've got on Udemy. You can download a PDF of our website work. You can get off to client testimonials, which are little videos, all sorts of things, which again just kind of make your profile stand out from other people's. And it's a really good opportunity, and it's one that I just see totally underutilized because people maybe they don't know it exists, or they just don't do very much with it. And again, it's colorful, it makes your profile stand out. And I guess you guys as marketeers, if you are that in your firms, this is a great opportunity for you to work with the people in your company that you're trying to get to do this stuff by giving them some of this material. And making their profiles work for them, because if you leave it up to them, let's face it, they probably won't get round to it because it's not high enough priority. So kind of tips for an all-star profile, and believe me, that's not my own words, that's the way LinkedIn phrase it. The first thing we talked about, positioning against your peers, your competitors. Have a look and see how you come across online, and just really step back from your own worldview to actually what are other people kind of thinking and seeing about you, or how are they going to perceive you. Like I say, think like the reader, particularly in terms of the summary. So craft it based on other people's needs and how you add value to those people, rather than, hey, I'm great, this is what I've done. Use that rich media featured section. So easy, such a quick win. All of you will have opportunities to upload content and marketing material that sometimes these people are using on a daily basis anyway when they go out and talk to people, yet they haven't actually uploaded it to their LinkedIn profile, where there's hundreds, maybe thousands of people looking at their profiles. Work on the recommendations section. So you probably know you can ask for recommendations, right? But time and time again, I see this where someone's got recommendations from 10 years ago and never again since. So it looks a bit bad to be reading a recommendation from someone that's in 2011. So check over your recommendations, see when the last ones were, see whether you can ask for some more recommendations at this time. I always like to say here, it's nice to give a recommendation in order to try and receive one back. Don't expect it, but just, you know, maybe that's a better way of just rather than just asking someone to recommend you, is go and give some recommendations first. Pay it forward. And then, as I mentioned before, ensure your education and experience is fully filled out, because the recommended people will not be as good if that isn't the case. So you need to make sure that your profile is as fully filled out as possible. So my action really for this section is to make sure you spend some time on this profile. It's so important. I update mine probably once or twice a year, and I would say that you probably don't need more than half an hour to an hour to do this. If you are working with other people, maybe sit down and do some work with them and help them to understand how, you know, some of these tips and how they can get the most out of it. Tip 3 is talking about disseminating knowledge and messaging. So in LinkedIn, there's 2 places really that you can do this. I mean, there are more with groups and things like that, but these are the kind of 2 ways that you can talk directly at people. And they both start in the same place. Homepage, pretty much center of the screen here, start a post and write an article. So these are your 2 kind of key ways to tell people about what you're up to or position yourself if you're looking to be a thought leader, and get information across. And they are very different. So starting a post, this is the kind of thing where you might want to use 2 or 3 sentences to describe what you're up to. Maybe you want to share things, maybe you want to mention somebody. Again, this all comes back to your own individual objectives for your own profile. What do you want to be seen as a personal brand? For me, it's about thought leadership. It's about explaining that I'm getting opportunities, in this example, to speak at things like London Business School's MBA program, something I'm incredibly proud of. So, you know, being able to talk about that and write that little update meant that in this instance, hundreds, maybe even thousands of people saw that I had done that. And then that immediately positioned me in their minds as the kind of person that gets asked to do this kind of talk on digital trends at London Business School's MBA program, which is something probably not too many people get. So having that kind of awareness and insight of the kind of things that you want to share is really important. Completely different update here, but this is just an update that James and I shared when we were 18, the company, obviously not us. And here we decided to change our agency from being kind of seen as more tactical web design and digital marketing agency to a more strategic one. But what was interesting, and the reason that I share this with you today, is because the day after I updated that and put that post out there, the marketing director of Exeter University got in contact. She was Jane Schaefer. She was connected with me, had seen that update, she'd read it, and she contacted me and said, "This is really timely, Alistair, because we're just about to write the digital strategy for Exeter University for the next 5 years, and I'd really like to kind of buy some consultancy time off you to come and help me." So, you know, I think to myself, if I hadn't have posted that update, would Jane have got in contact with me? Not sure. You know, maybe not. But it is a lot of the things that you look at and talk about with regard to LinkedIn. They're not silver bullets. They're things that if you are consistent, active, and you do things well regularly, people will pick up on it. But it doesn't happen overnight. Okay. A little tip: if you include other people in your updates, they're more likely to share. Everyone loves to be mentioned, right? Everyone's got an ego. They like to have stroke. So if you use the @ symbol in the update, so you use @ and then start typing the name and it pops down a list of names. If you tag them in a post, there's a good chance that that person, first of all, they'll be notified. Good chance that person will then share that probably amongst their own networks, or at least comment on it as well. So that's quite a good way of spreading your message into other people's messages, into other people's networks, sorry. So have that in the kind of mindset when you're thinking about your updates. The other area is articles. And for me, this is probably one of the most underutilized sections in LinkedIn. It's one of the areas that I don't know why people don't do it, but I think maybe people are scared or something. I'm not quite sure. But the articles part, which started on that same place where it said start a post, is an area, it's almost like a blog within LinkedIn. So you don't have to have your own blog or your own website with a blog. You can just start to create longer form content within LinkedIn's network itself. And I do this fairly regularly. And I would say my advice here is really you're looking for content that is probably 500-600 words plus, you know, much more than you would put into a post. And again, this comes back to, do you want to be seen as a thought leader? Because if you do, then this is a great place to share this kind of information. So having articles in your profile or in the people you're working with profile is super important. And what sort of stuff would you write about? Well, you know, this comes back to, again, your own and personal objectives, the objectives of the people that you're working with. If those are, say, partners in a particular niche, then writing about that niche on a regular basis, not every month necessarily, but, you know, even if you could get them to do something once a quarter, that might be a good win. I try and write every month if I can do, but it's not always possible. So here's an example of something I wrote: how to write a digital strategy for your business. And the reason I use this example is that it's an interesting one, because this is what we get paid to tell people, right? People ask us to come and write a digital strategy. So why would I give away that advice? Well, it's that kind of content which attracts more engagement, so more views, more shares, more likes, because it's really valuable, educational, useful content. And yes, some people are going to take that content and do it themselves, but they're probably not the right type of clients for us. I want somebody who's going to read that and say, wow, this guy really knows what they're talking about, or he knows what he's talking about. Let's get him in to talk to our firm. So giving away, sometimes you've got to get out of that sort of fear of giving away content which might be your own IP, and with a view to actually attracting people who want to see that. There is an awesome tool which you may know about called answerthepublic.com. Now, there's a free version. You can only do like 3 or 4 searches a day, I think, on it at the moment, and then you pay for it. But essentially what you do here is you put in any phrase. So when I was working with the Met Office, this is the example here. I was obviously talking to them about climate change, and I use that as an example. You put the term climate change in this example into this tool, and it goes away to Google, and it finds out the most popular questions that people are asking Google at that time with that phrase in it. And it categorizes them by how, which, where, when, who, etc. So when I'm talking to people about what content do you write, where do you start? Because that's often a question I get is, oh, Alistair, I want to do this stuff, but I don't really know what to write about. Here's the tools. The tools exist. So, you know, when we talked to the scientists about which of these questions they knew the answers to, they were jumping in straight away saying, well, I can do that one, tick, 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 tick. And suddenly they had a year's worth of content that they needed to create and write as articles. So great little tool, that. But I would encourage you really to make a plan, right? So particularly if you're working with somebody else to try and improve their profile, because it is one of those things that always goes down the priority list. So having a plan for updates, even for yourself, is really key, because, you know, think about the titles that you want to create articles about. Maybe put 12 in a row, so you've got a year's worth if you're doing it every month. And then every time you get a chance and you feel like doing a bit of writing or creating videos or whatever, then you have at least not got to think about what to do in the first place, because you've got the titles there for you. Tip 4 is about generating opportunities. So, you know, there is no silver bullet here, as I mentioned earlier on. It's all about being proactive, being consistent. There are a few ways that I do use this tool, and what couches them all is this word proactivity. So if I wasn't proactive on this stuff, it wouldn't work for me. All LinkedIn would be, and as it is for a lot of people, is a giant Rolodex of contacts, if people remember those things. So I don't want it to be that. I need it to be proactive. I need to be proactive about it. And to give you an idea, I sit down with my sales team, which is a small team, on a weekly basis. We carve out a couple of hours every week on a Friday to sit down and do work on LinkedIn, to proactively use it to generate opportunities. Now, some of that stuff I haven't gone into today because it's focusing on things like Sales Navigator, which is a paid for addition. So I'm not going to go into that, but, you know, there are a few things that I do that do generate opportunities, and I just wanted to share those with you. The first one is the university alumni page. So here's, if you went to university and you put it into your education, you automatically have this. So here's Exeter University's alumni. It's got 113 or 1,000 alumni in the database at the time I took this screenshot. But what's really cool is around the center of your page, you should see where it says search alumni. Now this is nice of them. They're allowing me to search my alumni by title, keyword, and company. And I've worked out that you can use things like and or operators in here. So if, for example, me and my sales team were looking to do a little campaign and try and work with PwC and wanted to get into them as a business, then why would I not go through people that have been to the same university and I can bond with them over something like this? So using the terms PwC and director brings that 112,000 down to 720 people who went to university at Exeter, who are probably still at PwC at director level, decision makers for me, who I can then get in contact with. And you never know, I might even know some of those people. So actually it's a really effective way. And we do this on a semi-regular basis when we're doing campaigns to work with certain businesses. Opportunity 2, this is a really simple one, but so effective, or has been for me, is just in the invitations you get. Now, most people probably just click accept, ignore, or accept, but I always take this to the next level. I always say, look at the people that are asking me to connect with them. And if I think that there's somebody that I want to do business with, or that there's worth trying to get into a conversation with, I'll always click accept, and then they move this a lot, but over on this screen, it's up the top right. Click message. So I've chosen Emma in this example, Emma Court. Click message immediately, and then always send an open-ended question. So in this example, hi Emma, thanks for connecting, how's business? And it just starts that conversation off with her. And what I found in the past on numerous occasions is that this leads to all sorts of things, but generally good conversations, quite often them asking for my help and advice. They've probably forgotten why they wanted to connect with me in the first place by this point, depending on how quickly you get back to them. So, you know, this is a really good little tool to kind of spark those conversations off. And again, it comes back to LinkedIn doesn't do the hard work for you. You've got to do that bit. But if you use these techniques, it starts the conversations off and gives you the ability. Otherwise, these people go into your Rolodex and they stay there and possibly forever. Opportunity 3 is just about the notification screen. So here, you know, these are the people that have engaged with my profile in some form. They've engaged with my articles, they've engaged with my profile itself. They are people that are the first people that I will look at on a sort of weekly or bi-weekly basis and say, you know, are these the kind of people we want to do business with? Because if they are, they've already shown an interest in our business and me. Therefore, maybe we should focus on them first. And I might just ask them out for a coffee, or I might actually just send them a message and just say, look, thanks for liking my articles or sharing them. It's standard relationship building stuff, but it's something that just gets overlooked because it's work. It's something to do. Another thing in the same screen is when people move around. So I take quite a lot of pride in making sure that, you know, if someone moves from one company to another, I make sure I keep in contact with them. I understand that, you know, those people can take you with them. So they're a really important kind of source of opportunities for us. So keeping an eye on where people move using the notification section is a really good kind of tactic, for want of a better phrase. Tip 5 is just about groups. Now, I'm not going to go into groups in great detail, only than to say there is a group for pretty much everything on LinkedIn. And I think the thing I see regularly through people is that everyone makes the same mistake, in my view. I mean, maybe it's not a mistake, actually. That's a bit unfair because I've certainly done this as well. And it's to go into the groups that they are listed in their industry. Okay, so for me, it might be this group here, Digital Marketing UK. That's the group for me. That's the group I should be in, right? Because that's my industry. And yes, to an extent, that there is a case for that because I can maybe learn something from other peers and see what's going on. So yes, there is definitely a case for being that. But what I encourage people to think about in these sessions is to think about where your targets hang out, where your clients hang out, where your prospects hang out. And what I mean by that is that to use an example, is that if you had someone who worked with, say, the third sector, then they should be looking at third sector groups and being the expert in another group. I want to be the digital marketing expert in the group called Charity UK because I know all about marketing charities. So being that person and trying to get out of that mindset of going and hanging around in a group full of egos that all know the same stuff is quite key here. So if you're going to use groups, I would probably say to you, only a couple, because you just never get around to looking at them otherwise, and really focus on niche areas that you have an expertise in. Tip 6, and this is my final tip before we finish off with a special guest appearance, is just about probably the most important thing I think that comes for any social media. So this isn't just LinkedIn, it's about engagement and what makes a social media profile work. Why do some people grow their social media profiles so much greater than other people? And it's been proven time and time again that the key really is engagement. It's not the talking at you. It's not the stuff that we've been talking about is very push up till now. You know, we've been talking about pushing our profiles. We've been talking about pushing our content out. That's very, hey, look at me. This is me. I'm great. When actually, and clearly you need to do that, but actually where you start to get the real value is when you go and engage with other people. So for LinkedIn particularly, that would be liking people's other content. It will be sharing their content. It will be commenting on their content. That's when you start to get in front of other people and other people's networks, and you'll find that your own networks grow because of it, and people will start to see you as being useful as well when you do that, and the kind of person that they want to interact with. So really important message in this, which is, yes, all that stuff's great, but actually spending time engaging with other people is probably really the key. And most people don't make time for it because it's work. Again, it's hard work, it takes time. This screenshot just gives you an idea of something, how passionately I feel about this, which is if anyone writes to me, I'll always write back to them for a start. But you know, when we have events that we run regularly, and this was just an example of lots of questions that or comments that came back after an event one day. And I got back from that event late at night, and I spent probably 2 or 3 hours literally responding. And this is just a small section of them, responding to individually to everybody on who made the time to comment, because engagement, I understand it is that important. So here's the final slide before I summarize, and it's a special guest slide. So I'm very, very pleased to have this in here, because this comes from Lauren at Turner & Townsend, who is hopefully on this call today. And Lauren did something which I think is great in the spirit of what this webinar itself, which is when she received the invite for the webinar, and she sought me out on LinkedIn. She wrote me a nice personalized message, very good, Lauren, and basically just wished me luck and said, you know, I've seen you doing this, it would be great to connect with you. So very, very impressive as start. Anyway, I thought I'd jump on that. So I wrote back to her and I said, look, I'd love to chat to you. And we had a phone call and we just talked about her job. And her job in Turner & Townsend is to help people internally to use LinkedIn and other social media more effectively. And so some of the lessons that she will be teaching those people will be exactly the same sorts of things that her and I've talked about and I've talked about today. But I really wanted to include something from her in this session because I thought it would be really useful. And she came up with this great idea of, okay, well, what do we do as a firm individually that we could share that might help other people in this call with their own firms? And these are great points, you know, this slide's fantastic. So I love some of the things they do. They train and develop individuals. So they offer one-to-one sessions with senior stakeholders where they look at their profiles, they give advice on those profiles, they give checklists of things to do. So some of the stuff that I've talked about today will be boiled down into checklists. They track their SSI scores. And you know, these are fantastic things for businesses to be doing individually. Any business should be really doing this kind of stuff. You know, she creates how-to guides with top tips. I love the stuff on the right hand side about the employee advocacy and influencers sending a roundup email to people to show them the kind of tips or the kind of content that the company is maybe sharing on their various social media sites, so that somebody maybe at partner level who's super busy can just click on it or copy and paste it into their own profile and share it. Just, it takes that kind of them thinking about it away, and I think that's a really clever idea that they use there. And then finally, that last bit, which I think is brilliant as well, and obviously it works in a very large firm very well, but it equally actually in my own firm with 20 people, it works just as well, is seek out the influencers in your own firm. Who are the people that you may or may not know about already that are doing this stuff and doing it well? You know, look at those people's profiles and work with them. Make them an influencer for your company, and work with them to do articles, work with them to maybe even get them to do these guest sessions or speakers internally, just to try and sell what you're doing there. So thank you so much, Lauren, for that. That's absolutely fantastic slide there. And this is my final slide, just as a quick summary really to the end. So I just want to highlight, you know, where we started, 6 points. What does your personal brand say about you? You know, how do you come across online? That's absolutely key. Think about who your audience is. So who are you actually talking to? Who's interested to hear from you? If you know those people, you can then start to work out what the questions are that they're asking, and that you have the answers to. People, I genuinely believe this, but people like to do business with people they like and trust, and get value from. So you have to be one of those people, and LinkedIn gives you a massive, fantastic ability to be that. Thought leadership and positioning you, or so your partners or directors as thought leaders, will lead to opportunities for your firm, but it won't happen overnight. It needs to happen consistently over a period, sometimes even of years. All of these social media sites are about keeping in the forefront of people's minds. It is the long game. It's not going to happen. You can't just become a salesperson with a new profile straight away. It doesn't happen like that. So making a habit of these things and getting consistently good at them is really the absolute key to doing this stuff right. And hopefully I made this point at the very end strongly enough, but doing all of this stuff, having these great profiles, having this great content is only part of the battle here. Making sure that you engage with other people is just as, if not more important than everything that I've said today. I hope that's been useful. I believe Anna is about to turn a microphone back on again.
Yeah. And
probably not, hopefully not ask me too many difficult questions.
No, we've got a lot of questions, which is fantastic.
Oh, have we?
So we have. So we might run over a little bit, but hopefully people can hang on because we've got some fantastic questions here. So the first question that came in was, what would you say if someone used an infographic in the summary section?
I mean, I think a lot of these questions are tricky to answer without context, aren't they? But it depends on the infographic a lot and what it's about and if it's relevant, I guess. You know, I think infographics are useful. Sometimes they get quite dated. I would say that, you know, if you've produced a good infographic and it's really relevant, then I see absolutely no problem with using that. So yeah, I think it would be good.
Okay, cool. The next one, if you're at a smaller event or a networking event like PM Forum, how can you connect with everybody in the room in a few clicks?
So, this is a tricky one. Now, actually, I don't know where they stand at the moment regarding this, because they did have a feature on the app at one point, which they took away, where you could actually find out who was in the room around you and you could connect with them. And I think, I must admit, I've not looked at it actually recently to see if it's back again, but I don't know why they took it away, to be honest. Maybe there was some sort of GDPR issue or something. So, you know, for me, I think it's probably coming down to slightly more manual work there, and actually going and doing the hard work yourself and talking to people and getting those introductions, rather than just, because actually, you know, do I want someone who I haven't even spoken to at an event to then connect with me as if they know me? And I just think you can't beat personal touch in those instances. And, you know, if someone's met me and I've had a chat with them, great, I'm very happy to connect. But I've had a few people that have seen me on an event list and connected with me, and I know for a fact that I've not spoken to them, and that just irks me. So I think you've got to be a bit careful actually with that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Hashtags, good or bad? If good, how many do you think people should use?
Oh, the hashtag in LinkedIn. I really had a problem with this at first. I must admit, and I didn't have it in my slides, but I would do in a longer session actually. I've come around to the idea that hashtags in LinkedIn are probably useful to use, and I didn't like it at first. I thought it was the place for Instagram, not LinkedIn, not the business world. But the more I see it used, and the more I use it myself, the more I think it is worth having, because it does get you reach that you wouldn't necessarily get otherwise. And the thing about a hashtag is that you can follow it. So if you use clever hashtags, then you're more likely to be found for certain things that you write about. So I think it's probably something where you should use them. I wouldn't overuse them. I'd probably only put 3 or 4 in a post. I don't absolutely kind of, like I do on Instagram, maybe use 10 or 15 sometimes. I would only use 3 or 4 just because I think it doesn't look great in terms of aesthetically either. So yeah, I would say yes, and yeah, keep them small numbers.
Lovely. And why do articles get much lower views than posts?
This is an interesting one because it's not actually my experience. I think, and I have had this question a few times before, I think this comes down to your network and what your network expects of you and what they're used to from you and what they like to read as well. And, whether you're connected to the right people, are you then writing the right articles for those people? Maybe the numbers are lower because of that. I don't know. It's a tricky one. I mean, I guess with posts, it's automatically into people's feeds. There's probably some sort of algorithmic thing going on there as well. But I actually find that my personal articles do better than my posts. But that is just me personally, and I know that other people have the opposite. So maybe that's what's happening with you, if that's who you're talking about. I don't know. But I think that's where it's important to have a mixture, isn't it? So you need to make sure you're posting regularly. I meant to say this earlier, but at the moment during COVID, I'm probably posting every day. But before that, I was probably posting once or twice a week max. Whereas I'll send out articles maybe once or twice a month max. So it's having a mixture, isn't it?
Question here: how should you respond to requests for a recommendation if your company policy prohibits them or strongly recommends against them?
Well, I mean, if your company policy prohibits them, then you haven't really got a lot of space to move in, I guess, have you? I mean, it's difficult, that, isn't it? Again, without context, but I think you've just got to write something back to that person, which is very polite and explains the fact that your company doesn't allow it. You'd love to do it, and unfortunately, you're just not allowed to, given the company policy. I don't think there's an easy answer to that particularly.
So the next one from Alexandra, there are a few similar ones to this. So can you repost an article from your website as a LinkedIn article, or do you recommend replicating it on LinkedIn?
Oh, it's a good question. Okay, so I don't believe there's a right and wrong answer to this. I think this comes down to probably your own personal time. I think if we take a very base level, unique content across everything is the way to go, right? So, if you can create unique content for every single platform, that's what you should do, right? But let's be fair, we're not in a realistic world there. And actually, I would then suggest that it comes down to, is the repurposing of that content more important because you need to get it out quickly to different audiences, but maybe hit the same people a couple of times? I believe that is sometimes more important than being unique, because yes, if I had to create a unique article for my blog, for my company blog, for my LinkedIn profile, for my Twitter, every single time, it would be unfathomable. I just wouldn't be able to do it. So if I can, I share unique content on certain platforms when I can. Otherwise, I do repurpose the same articles on multiple platforms. And I often actually say, by the way, as well. So if I write something on my blog, for example, on my LinkedIn article, at the top of it, I might say something like, this was first posted on my blog, which you can find at iambanksy.co.uk.
Okay, thank you. Next one's about video. Do you recommend the use of video in articles?
Oh yes, I love video. Very passionate about video. Also recognise that it's something that people detest. Although I think in this time we're all getting very much used to seeing our own faces and hearing our own voices. So I really hope that actually COVID will be the birth of a lot of people doing video, because I only wish more people would do it. It is such a powerful medium. It conveys so much more than words sometimes can. And also you hit a different audience, and particularly if you're going after a younger demographic. You know, if you have a YouTube channel, so I post a lot of videos onto my YouTube channel, which I then pull into my LinkedIn profile in articles, for example. And what I notice is that the people that comment on my videos are not the same people that read my articles. So when I did one the other day actually, where I wrote an article that I was targeting really at CEO level, probably, let's face it, 55, 60 plus. And I wrote it rather than did a video, because I knew that target demographic at the time were more likely to read an article than watch my video. But if I was doing something for maybe a younger demographic at say 30s, then I might do it by video. So love video, absolutely, get into it if you can do, because the other thing is, if you do it, you will be above everyone else because no one else wants to do it.
Okay, thank you. There is a longer question here from Tal, who works for a PR agency. Is it ever a good idea for senior executives to outsource the management of their LinkedIn profile? I've worked with many clients who have this as a request, i.e., can you run this particular partner's LinkedIn? Seems to me that it's far more effective and authentic for individuals to be empowered to manage their own channels. But this does bring planning implications in terms of ensuring brand guidelines, tone of voice, BD strategy, making sure everything's aligned. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so my thoughts on this are, I don't think it's a good thing to be entirely outsourced. I think it's kind of cheating the system to some extent as well. You know, if you take on board my point at the end that engagement is one of the key areas, then you can't outsource engagement really. I mean, you could, but it'd be horrendous really. So I think you could outsource the creation of content for sure. I think you can outsource articles and say that people, you know, you could ghostwrite articles for, and I do actually do quite a lot of sessions with CEOs where I talk to them about the people in their teams that they could get to help them with these things. But I really think that person's got to own the profile themselves, and actually it should be their tone of voice. So they've got to find someone that can actually partner the content and make it sound like it's come from that person really as well. But I don't believe that you should be outsourcing kind of the posting and the engagement at all. I don't think that's a very good thing to do. In the example, you know, the person that's posting this question might have an example where that is the case, but I personally can't think of one at the moment off the top of my head.
What is a good engagement rate for articles?
So I mean, I think engagements are going to be across different. There's different types of engagement, right? So there's likes, there's comments, there's shares. Again, this comes down to context. So it comes down to the individual article, who's aimed at, what you're trying to achieve with it as well. So there might be some articles that I write where actually I don't really need a high engagement because I'm really targeting at a very, very niche group of people that I actually want to see that and understand it and see that I've written it. Whereas, you know, an article that gets, or a post that gets hundreds of likes, maybe lots and lots of comments, lots of shares, it's almost, a lot of that sometimes comes down to vanity. And you know, has that actually achieved anything? I don't know. The London Business post that I showed, London Business School post that I showed earlier on, you know, was great from a vanity perspective, but I got lots and lots of engagement. But I wouldn't say there is kind of a level to kind of aim at necessarily. I really think it comes down to your own personal objectives for those posts and what you want to achieve with them. The other thing I would say as well, quite important point on this, is that don't forget that it isn't just about the engagement that you get on these posts and that you can see. There is, for every person that likes, shares, comments, there are probably another 10 people who have read but not done any of that. So the numbers of people that are seeing your content but not engaging with it are usually huge, sometimes phenomenal, and you don't even realize because you never see that. And the London Business School one was a very good example of that, because I had people for months afterwards posting that didn't do any of those, that didn't engage with it, coming up to me at events and saying, "Can't believe you're talking at London Business School, like that's amazing." And it was like, yeah, well, I didn't see you engage on that, but actually it had happened. So I suppose don't get worried too much about the engagement, because there will be a lot of people that just don't take the time to do it, and it's nothing to do with you.
Thank you. Do you think there's a benefit to using LinkedIn articles over a firm's own blog feed? Or should they have both? Well,
I think you need to use both. But I think, the company blog this comes down to the question about repurposing again, doesn't it? So, there will be things that we post onto our company blog that we then repurpose in articles. We would probably be quite careful about that. So we wouldn't necessarily, I think one of the mistakes I've seen some firms do is where they get lots of people to share the same article. And then what can happen there is that the networks cross over and all those networks see the same article coming out from multiple different people, which just looks a bit weird and probably annoys a few people as well. So I think, you probably do need to be a bit careful about who does what, but maybe picking the key people in your firm that article would make sense to have on their profile would be quite a good way of doing it. Or just getting those people to post, like Lauren was saying, tell people about these posts going out on the blog and ask people to backlink to the blog itself.
And then a question here about the Ask the Public or Answer the Public. Does it pull research from international sources or just the UK?
That's a good question actually that I don't know the answer to. I believe it's you can subset it to the UK. Now I can't remember because I'm so used to using the pro version that we pay for as an agency, what you get for the free. So I'm pretty sure that there is a drop down in there on the search bar where you can choose the location. I think you can choose UK as a drop down or go international, I think. But as I say, we pay, so I can't remember what the free version has on it.
Okay. Can you upload podcasts onto the featured section?
So what you would do here is you would create the podcast in something like, I don't know, Spotify or Apple in iTunes, and you would link to it. So you would link from it rather than uploading it, which is pretty much what you do with things like video as well. So, put it up onto YouTube and then link out to it.
Okay, lovely. A question here. My LinkedIn profile has lots of connections from people in the firm I work in. Is this a good thing, or does my profile come across looking too focused on the firm I work for?
This is a tricky one, I think, because my view is that I don't think it really matters too much. I don't think it matters. There are only going to be a few people that start going and looking at who you're connected to. And typically those are business development people that are really trying to work their way through firms to sort of work out what the kind of buyer matrix is and stuff like that. So I don't think you should worry too much about it. But what I do think you should probably do is get connecting to people externally in the ways that I sort of talked about before, and start to build up your external network as quickly as you can. But don't worry about the fact that you're connected to lots of people in your company.
Okay, lovely. This one's a similar one to the one that Tal asked. How do you feel about a PA managing a C-suite's social feeds?
Yeah, refer to the same question really before. I think it's the same thing, isn't it? I think maybe
I guess again it depends a little bit on what the relationship between the PA and that person is. You know, how close is that? Because if that partner, for example, was literally saying to the PA, "Can you write this?" Okay, that's fine, yeah. But if they're expecting the PA to write on behalf of the person without giving them any guidance at all, I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
And for the reasons I said earlier on.
Is your LinkedIn profile your own or your company's if you are an employee? And how do you manage a mix of personal and business posts?
I'm not a solicitor, but I pretty much have spoken to a lot of solicitors in the past and a lot of people. My understanding quite clearly is that your LinkedIn profile is your own, not your company's. And I do think it's a grey line that a lot of people seem to cross over. And I've seen all sorts of approaches to that in the years that I've been doing this, which I won't go into now. Some fairly draconian approaches that firms have had where they've asked anybody that you connect to on your LinkedIn profile during the time where you're in employment with us has to be replicated on our CRM system, for example. For me, that's a lot of work. But you know, maybe, I don't know. Through to those kind of more forward thinking, maybe more modern companies that just fully understand, and this is certainly the approach I have, is that you know, if my guys in my company are using this to promote that, to build their careers, that's fine. I want to give them the encouragement that they can get out to do this stuff, because I know that it will benefit us as a company in the short term while they're with us. Yes, they might take that on and work with someone else afterwards, but that's fine. I get that. And I'm working quite closely with a couple of the guys in my company to really position them as thought leaders in their own individual areas of digital marketing. So I you know, it is their profile. It's nothing to do with me. I just understand that we'll benefit from it if they do a good job of it.
Yeah.
The second part, wasn't there, to that question? Managing a mixture. Yeah. I mean, I get this again a lot. Mixture of personal and business posts. I think this comes down to your own individual views and how you feel about this. So no right or wrong answer. One thing I didn't say, which I do quite often in these sessions, is that I don't just want to be known as Alistair Banks, digital marketing agency director. I want to be known as Alistair Banks, family man, 2 small kids, fan of skiing, fan of the Exeter Chiefs, because what I found in sharing some of that with people is that I've attracted similar people in other businesses who have those kind of views and ethos over their own lives, and I've gotten really, really well with those people. So I have this, I get that people don't want to share their personal life, and if that's not for you, that's fine, don't do it. But I think a mixture is certainly worked for me. What I would say is that I don't really do that a lot on LinkedIn. So I'm sharing more of the personal stuff on places like Twitter and Instagram, and then the business stuff I really leave to LinkedIn.
Okay. If you post an article on the firm's website and then post the same article on LinkedIn, does this impact on Google's policy of duplicate copy? So do you get penalized, I guess?
I don't think you'll find any exact answer to that which says yes or no. Duplicate copy, duplicate content is an issue for SEO. People will know that on the call, I'm sure. But it tends to be website to website, and it's all about, you know, copying content directly from someone else and putting it onto your own website and things like that. So you do have to be really careful about that. I think because LinkedIn is directly behind a login screen, it's a lot less likely, if not at all, going to have any kind of effect. I wouldn't want anyone to quote me on it, and I'd probably take advice from, you know, some of the guys in my office who are better placed than me in the world of SEO to answer that question. But yeah, I'm certainly not too concerned when it comes to my own thing, and I haven't seen any negative impact by doing it ourselves in our company.
Yeah, fab. And one more, like, comment or share, what's the best form of engagement in your opinion?
It's a good question to answer at the end. I like that. Yeah, it's a good one. This, I think liking is fairly flippant, right? It's very easy to click like on someone's posts, and it's fine, you know, it does a job. But so much more important to comment and share. I think I see those as almost like a triangle. So I would go like at the bottom, you know, it's easy to do it a lot. Comment is the next one up, where, you know, making a comment on someone and added a bit of your value. I would say, you know, if you're going to comment, don't necessarily just comment and say, thanks, that's great, but actually add something to the conversation if you can do. And then sharing is the top, you know, that's the best for someone else, because then you are literally putting someone else's conversation in front of your network. And, you know, if I share someone's post today, that's potentially going out to, I think I'm 6,000 followers at the moment. So, you know, or connections. So 6,000 people that could get in front of. Now I know it won't happen that way, but that's how I would see it, is that kind of triangle.